Hey everyone, it's FLAK. When Battlefield 1 was announced and players saw the Storm of Steel prologue for the first time, they went nuts. The combination of cinematics and this gritty first-person combat was brutal. The sweeping war story showed players the devastation in the trenches of World War I up close. However, it did it in an incredibly human way. In it, we saw the triumphs of humanity as well as its darkest depths. However, we often forget about the character at the beginning, that Harlem Hellfighter who was awoken from his dream into a waking nightmare. Now, you'd probably assume that he's recovering from his wounds away from the front line. However, if what we see in the prologue is true, his fate could actually be much, much darker. One of the most noticeable things about the intro is the song. It's a piece by Fabian Andre and Wilbur Schwant with lyrics by Gus Kahn. However, it wasn't written until 1931, over a decade after the events of Battlefield 1. The particular version of the song is from 2014 and sung by Margot Bingham. It originally aired as part of HBO's Boardwalk Empire series. That aside, with the way the song sounds in the Battlefield 1 intro, we're meant to think it's playing in the room, and with some artistic license, that puts this scene at the earliest in 1931. World War I ended in 1918, 13 years earlier, so we know when this might take place, but where does it take place, and why is all of this important? Well, judging from the look of the room, or mise en scène if you will, we know the main character is in a hospital. How do we know that? He's dressed in a white shirt and the sheets and blanket are also white. This was commonplace back in the 20s and 30s and for good reason. White fabrics allowed doctors, nurses, and any other caretakers to notice injuries or problems quickly. Right? If somebody has a wound that reopens or something like that, you're going to be able to easily spot it on those crisp white sheets. It's also a color chosen because you don't have to worry about it fading with stringent hospital sanitation practices, and on a psychological level, it just feels clean. A couple other things point to this being a hospital. You've got the open window here, very common thing to see for the time period. There was this very strong belief in fresh air and the wonders that it could do for the human body. There's a small white cup at the bedside and presumably a Bible. That's pretty Spartan for anyone's home. There are also no pictures or personal comforts. So why is the character there over a decade after the war? Obviously, there's a whole host of options. Perhaps he's there for something as simple as appendicitis. However, I think it's important to look at the shots used in this part of the prologue. Now, I actually teach video production, and for narrative pieces, I always say it's important to consider not only what you place in front of the camera, but that which you hide or conceal from the audience. It's a phenomenal aspect of filmmaking. For example, instead of showing someone's demise on screen, you can present it in a way that leaves the manner of it up to the mind of the audience. And in many cases, harnessing the audience's imagination can be far more terrifying or crushing. Remember this concept, as I'm going to be referring to it a couple of times here in the video. At no time in the hospital shots do we get a look at the soldier's body. Everything is taken from the shoulders up. We have no way to verify whether or not he has suffered any serious injuries. And if this is starting to sound familiar, you might have seen a 1971 Dalton Trumbo film called Johnny Got His Gun. If you haven't seen it, it is rough. The plot follows a World War I soldier who's lost every limb as well as the majority of his face. He's essentially trapped in his body and abandoned by the very people who sent him off to war. He craves human attention, which is often represented throughout the film by the soft touch of a nurse. Now, the soldier in the Battlefield 1 prologue still has his face, so we know that he's got that going for him, but as for the rest, it's all left up to the audience's imagination here, and that identical trick is used in Johnny Got His Gun. In the film, we never see Johnny's injuries. Everything is concealed by a mask, a blanket, or a camera angle, and you'll notice that's exactly what's happening here in Battlefield 1. If the soldier suffered traumatic injuries, there is a chance that he might require full-time hospital care years later. However, after World War I, there was a tremendous push for those crippled in combat to return to self-sufficiency. Prosthetics were developed, as well as many programs to re-educate and retrain amputee soldiers. Even the war's lone quadruple amputee, Canadian Private Curly Christian, was able to lead a successful life after recovering from his wounds, though he still required full-time caregiving. Coincidentally or not, Curly Christian was black. If Battlefield 1's soldier is still in the hospital 13 years after the end of hostilities, it's safe to assume that his wounds must have been devastating. A lot of this is open to interpretation, but what isn't up for debate is the soldier's obvious mental anguish. It's often overlooked in this scene that the soldier isn't actually dreaming when he experiences the events of the prologue. He's awakened from a dream and then immediately has a flashback. We now understand a strong connection between flashbacks and post-traumatic stress disorder. However, back in the 20s and 30s, the understanding of such a condition was rudimentary at best. Similarly, shell shock was a serious problem for those in the trenches. So much so, armies developed special ways of handling what they then called war neuroses or bullet wind. Soldiers with shell shock suffered from a wide range of symptoms, from what was called hysterical gait to paralysis of the body. Generally, soldiers suffering from these conditions were whisked away from the front lines to recover in rear areas away from the fighting. Thanks to diligent and groundbreaking work by doctors and caregivers, the recovery rate for such conditions was high. However, in some instances, it could take months, and unfortunately, some of these affected soldiers never recovered. For those unable to integrate into society as productive citizens, many were sent to mental hospitals, which, again, unfortunately, could be the case here. We don't get a lot of time with the soldier to see his mental stability. Conceivably, his mental state could be absolutely shattered. It's another theme that's present in Trumbo's Johnny Got His Gun, with the soldier finding solace only in dreams, while reality represents a nightmare. However you look at this, impressively, in just a few seconds on the screen, DICE created a character that somehow represents almost every wound, both psychological and physical, that millions of soldiers faced during and after the Great War. Brilliantly, it's left up to the audience to decide the fate of the soldier in the Battlefield 1 prologue. Has he been in the hospital for years, seriously injured? Is he suffering from crippling PTSD, or is he just recovering from a routine ailment at a hospital? It depends on your imagination and what you fear or what you want to believe. Universally, though, it communicates on some level the lingering trauma of that lost generation, and I do think it's an underappreciated companion to the brutal and violent gameplay present in the game's prologue. I'm curious what you think happened to the soldier in the prologue. This just kind of struck me as I was replaying the Battlefield 1 campaign, so tell me your thoughts below. I do want to mention I just put out a new video on cool details in Battlefield 2042, and we just started a Shorts channel, so make sure you check those out. In the meantime, I'll leave links in the video description. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If not, a dislike. Make sure to subscribe, tap the bell to get updates on all the latest Battlefield news, and if you want to support this channel, keep your money, share this video. As always, thanks for watching.